downloads it and creates an MP4 file. So you can basically run it offline. The reason Mike Emery recommended it is because I'm going to be teaching a Zoom class. And, if you're running a YouTube video and you're trying to teach a class, you're using a lot of bandwidth to both download it and then send it out to the people that are watching. But if you create an MP4 video of it, you can just broadcast it directly. And it works wonderful. It just downloads quickly. It puts it in a folder, and then you can move the MP4s anywhere you want. So I highly recommend it. And as I said, I have now put it in. I don't know what the 53 is. Ooh. But I created that link. So Ron has been using it also, but it's a great way to capture videos. So. And then I guess you could edit them too. I didn't even try that. Trimmed them down. I'll have to look at that. Okay. What else is happening?
Oh, in the chat, Sam said something about Parallels Toolbox.
Has the same function. Yep. Yeah, I haven't downloaded Parallels Toolbox.
Jonathan, you had mentioned earlier about the Zoom pop-ups related to things. The one just came up for the live stream, so everyone's going to need to click OK on that.
Yeah.
It's a bit of a trap waiting to happen, isn't it?
Well, you just you have two choices. You can accept and acknowledge, or you can leave the meeting. So
yeah, it's kind of obscure at the top of the screen. You hardly notice it, as Jonathan said. It's kind of, I know until you mentioned it, Dan, I didn't look at the top of my screen.
Well, on the one hand, for privacy reasons, it's important that Zoom gives people that option. But on the other hand, if it starts getting in the way of other people, then they have to find a better way. I think one of the dilemmas is that when the Zoom meeting starts, the recording might not yet even be turned on. It's very common for people to turn on recording and live streaming while the meeting is going on. So it's not like Zoom could take care of this, before people enter the meeting. Like when you join the meeting, to get a pop-up saying, if the meeting is live streamed or recorded, are you okay with that? I don't know.
Okay, what Sam posted here about the video. Anybody have any before presentation or questions or comments? Apple news from somebody else? What's happening in the world?
Yep, I'll just make a very quick comment. As I've said before, I always do Zoom on the iPad, and they appear to have changed the user interface on the iPad in the direction that I quite like. Used to be, if there were more Hollywood squares than would fit on one screen, I had to scroll left to right, and I couldn't see everybody at the same time. Now it seems to be able to scroll vertically in one long page, and I like that better. And just a testimonial for using the iPad for Zoom. It's just brilliant. It's absolutely brick simple. It just works, and I never have the problems that people talk about on Windows or Mac. And I tend to keep apps updated anyway, but I've never had a problem if I'm one or two updates behind. It just works on the iPad. So if you have an iPad and you haven't tried Zooming on it, the Zoom app on the iPad is very elegant, and I like being able to carry the iPad around, put it in the kitchen, and stay connected while I'm doing something, or now sit in a comfortable chair holding the iPad on my lap. It's just better than sitting someplace where I can't move connected to a computer.
Right.
Gabe, could I ask, when you use the iPad for Zoom, Do you see the dialog boxes asking for permission for the recording and for the live stream? And is that easy to handle on the iPad?
Yes, absolutely. I see it. I get a little pop-up on the bottom of the screen, and the screen is small enough compared to a typical monitor. So it's the little pop-ups are still within my field of view, and it tells me the meeting is being recorded, and I say okay. It tells me it's being live streamed. I say okay. Um, the chat is easy to deal with. The options are easy to deal with. So if you haven't tried it on an iPad, give it a shot. Because I used to do at the very, very beginning of COVID, I was doing Zoom on my computer. And when I started doing it on the iPad, I said, that's the way to do it.
Okay, we have a lineup of comments here. Sam's first, then Joe, then Jerry.
Just in case anybody wasn't doesn't have automatic updates enabled or doesn't follow any of the sources, Aaron usually posts notices to the Pi email lists. I follow a Twitter account. I see those, but I also follow a Twitter account, ISW Updates, that is really good about posting all of the Apple updates to different platforms and their operating systems. They did release 17.4.1 on March 21st, so just a couple of days ago, and it does have some important security updates and bug fixes. So it is worthwhile to make sure that you are current on your iPad OS and your iOS on your phone.
Go ahead, Joe.
I just wanted to say I've never not used the iPad for Zoom, so I don't even have a sense of the computer experience. Sometimes you guys talk about stuff that I have never experienced. As far as updates, Aaron sent around a thing about the 17.4.1, and I've seen other stuff, but they just say security and bug fixes, and unlike a lot of others, they don't really seem to list them. I'm looking for a particular bug fix, and I can't find a list of what they've fixed. So 17.4 broke something for me, and I'm waiting for them to fix it.
Yeah. So since I'll reply, since I threw that out there, Joe. And if you're on 17.4, you want 17.4.1 for the security updates. Apple does disclose those once they've been out, once they've fully released it, at the level of disclosing the CVE, the vulnerability that was exploited, not necessarily what they did to mitigate it. And they just don't have a comprehensive list of bugs that are fixed for Mac OS, iOS, or iPad OS. Sometimes they give a little detail, sometimes they don't. But it's a fruitless quest. If you are looking for a complete list, you're not going to find it.
All right, well, thanks.
A lot of times they don't want to tell you what the security issue that's fixed is, because those people that don't update and those people that want to use it will suddenly hit you with it. So it's not very good to tell you why, not like saying you left your house door open. Put that in this conversation. You don't want to tell anybody that. Jerry, go ahead.
Yeah, hi. I've been getting back to the issue about downloading YouTube videos. Excuse me. I've been using Downy 4, and I wonder if anybody has used that and how it compares to the other two, the 4K download or the Parallels Toonbox.
Well, I know the 4K download it works so great. You just you do the share, copy the link, you paste it in the box on the 4K download, and it just starts downloading. You don't even have to paste it. You just click on the box, and it automatically grabs it from the.
Yeah, I think I haven't used Downy for a while, but I think it operates the same way. So I guess they're comparable.
Yeah. Maybe it could have more options of how it's downloading the video and everything like that, and things. But go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks, Roy. I just wanted to respond to Joe, and I do know it's frustrating that Apple doesn't post what bugs were addressed. Sometimes they will, as Sam mentioned, but there's there's a lot of bugs that never really are acknowledged as being addressed. But if you look at the developer release notes, you get a lot more information than you get in the links that I typically send out whenever there's an update. So the about this update notes are pretty sparse, but Joe or others, if you want to look at the developer release notes, they typically give you a lot more information, including in a lot of cases, the actual bug number that Apple uses for internally tracking the tool. So what I'll do is I'll paste some of those links in the chat so folks can bookmark those if you want. But that's, one thing that, I don't know what specifically you're looking for, Joe, but if you want to look at the release notes, you might have better luck. So I'll share those links. Thanks, Roy.
Okay, unrelated links. One of the things that Aaron did post was the docs have now been put together in one location, and I'm putting that link in the chat notes. So if you need documentation on any of your Apple devices or software, you can go to one location and feed through that and look at, and I think download them. And that's one thing we were talking about books and Kindles last at the clubhouse, and that's something that's nice to put in books is Apple documentation. Good place to keep the same style files in the same Apple program. Go ahead, Mary.
Question for Gabe. Gabe, do you have your iPad synced with your hearing aids?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I guess before we get started with any regular meeting stuff, I want to put out a promo again. It's coming up for election time for the Apple Club and for our club. And we want to encourage people that are not on the board to volunteer to be on the board. We have, other than having 4 people that will probably continue, we have 2 more openings. And it'd be nice to fill those. We like other comments, other feedback. The board meetings are pretty simple, usually meet only 4 times a year. The club is pretty much on autopilot for the most part. But we'd like, some new people to come join us on the board and give us some feedback, give us some, help in talking about our topics and things. So that's coming up. Think about volunteering. You'll probably maybe hear from some people hoping that you'll consider it. It's not a hard task to be on. It's tough. Jonathan, I'll turn the meeting over to Jonathan. I really don't have anything further, I don't think.
You underestimate your wealth of knowledge, Roy. Yeah, I quickly wanted to ask TK to introduce himself. I don't know if he was an older Pi member, but came to us via the meetup group. TK?
Hi, I am not a member. I actually knew about Apple Pie from my dad, who was an Apple enthusiast. That was over quarter century ago, I guess. So yeah, I think I did go to one meeting in between the time when, in the last 25 years at one of the churches, I think.
At Cedar Lane in Bethesda?
Yeah. I used to work down the street at the Stone Ridge School, K through 12 school there. I think I've been working pretty much in education for most of my time. Pretty much worked at every single public school county in the area. So that's pretty much it for me.
Well, thanks for coming today. And yeah, even Pi members, actually, some of them like Meetup as the best way to keep track of meetings. So we keep the Meetup thing going.
Here I am again.
It seems weird to be calling on you, Roy, since you
I know.
really should.
It's a related topic because we were talking about meetings, and that was the topic. I did forget to mention that we are going to have a live meetup. We have 2 of them coming up. We're going to live gather that are scheduled. Now I looked at the calendar and now I forgot what date it was. Let's see, May 4th. I wanted Saturday, May 4th. We're going to have a meeting at the James Lee Community Center in Falls Church. And we're going to try to coordinate that if anybody wants to come in on Metro, we'll have some member that lives in the area or nearby with a vehicle to carpool you to the meeting. It's very close to the East Falls Church Metro exit, Metro Orange Line. So that's coming up May 4th. It's going to be in lieu of our holiday end of year party, is going to be very similar. We're going to be able to have foods and beverages, non-alcoholic, but so we will be gathering there and putting out more information on Groups.io for people because we'd like to know, kind of get an idea of how many people are going to show up and things like that. So you'll hear more about that meeting. Coming up at next month's general meeting will be at George Mason. That'll be on campus. It'll be with Jim McLean, who is kind of in charge of the advanced technology at George Mason, informing different professors there about what's the latest thing. And he's currently working with AI. Years ago, we were there. He was doing 3D printers and virtual devices, and he's still doing virtual, the Meta Oculus Pros and things like that. So he'll talk about that, but the meeting will be at George Mason. If you've gone there before, we used to have tickets for parking. Parking you'll have to do on your own. I think there's a free lot that's open on Saturdays. I'm going to double check that because they just keep changing what they have on parking. But you can park in the Shenandoah, which is closest to probably where our meeting will start before we go over to Jay McLean's lab. And it's just a machine, and they've changed the parking structure now, or parking way you do it now. It's the kind of new way you put in your car license and the number of hours you expect to park, and then pay for that. And that they monitor the cars by driving around and checking licenses to see if your license has been there longer than the time you paid for. So, but as I said, we'll have more about that before the April meeting. So that's
and one more kind of meeting or group detail that I wanted to bring back is out of the terrific talk by Jen Wilcox from the Cryptologic Museum next to NSA. We are trying to plan a group tour of the museum that she or someone under her thing will give us. And we brought this up, and I think have 3 PI members who have already expressed interest. And if anybody who hasn't before would like to be included in this, I don't know how we'll schedule it. Probably try to do on a weekend. Just either send me an email or post in the chat so I can add you to the list.
And another meeting is Gabe is putting together, or we're kind of working. We're trying to coordinate a casual gathering, just a casual get together at the Hawk and Griffith Pub in Vienna, Virginia. We'll find out what's happening there, but it's just kind of a casual get together just to talk. Nothing, really, happening. You may have noticed that most of these meetings are being scheduled in Virginia and the area around here. So we highly encourage the people out in Maryland to try to coordinate a meeting in their area to gather together the people that are a little closer to the Maryland area. So that's all I have to get. Again, back to Jonathan. Tag team.
Well, folks, are there any comments on what we've talked about? Or questions, because what we'll do is get started with our talk today with Roy Shrout. Comments or questions before we get to that, folks? Oh, Joe, the G-form attendance was in the PI invitation, but I'll paste it in the chat once I turn the meeting over to Roy.
Thank you. I want to comment. I think the lawsuit against the DOJ lawsuit is stupid.
Frivolous.
That too, but stupid.
Well,
They said it results in crappier equipment, and I just don't understand that as a concept.
I Roy Shansby, do you echo that, or are you going to go counterpoint?
Ron.
Ron Shansby? No, Ron. Maybe we'll get back to him. Yeah, Aaron included links to a bunch of articles about it, and we'll have to see how this plays out. And that could be a whole meeting, I think. Well, folks, let me introduce Roy Shrout. Roy worked for Fairfax County, starting in public safety, and then moved up the ranks to assume the lead role as squad supervisor in 2001. In 2003, he moved to the Office of Emergency Management, and then was promoted to deputy coordinator in 2006. He served as a situation leader for the National Capital Region Emergency Operations Center, and as the chair of the National Capital Region Operations Center Committee, where he implemented several regional Homeland Security Information Network programs to help with information sharing and situational awareness for planned events and infrastructure emergencies. He authored a white paper on situation awareness in the National Capital Region and was the co-chair for a regional situational awareness working group to identify essential elements of information, review existing technology and process, and develop recommendations on how to increase information sharing in the region. He served as program manager for the implementation of the Fairfax County Public Safety Drone Program, which includes law enforcement, fire and rescue, and emergency management. Prior to his retirement, he also received approval by the Board of Supervisors to expand the program to include county agencies such as Parks, Public Affairs, and Public Works, setting the stage for Fairfax County to be one of the first all-county drone programs. Well, we're very pleased to have Roy Shrout at this PI meeting for a very timely topic. And Roy, welcome to our PI meeting, and the floor is yours. I will make you a co-host as we discuss so that you won't have any trouble sharing your screen. And PI members, I will then spotlight Roy while he's talking to make for a cleaner recording.
Thank you, Jonathan. I just want to make sure you can actually hear me.
Yep, you're very clear, Roy.
Fantastic. All right, and I'll bring up the PowerPoint in just a second. It says you have disabled participant screen. Maybe you've done it. Oh, there we go. All right, hang on one second. All right, are you seeing the display?
We sure are, Roy. Thanks.
Okay, fantastic. Now, one thing I do, I've got several video clips, so I'm going to minimize the screen so I can get back to the desktop to grab those. But anyway, Jonathan, thank you, and Gabe, thank you. Gabe, I know you all know him, but he and I go way back. He was part of my task force that we put together in Fairfax County back in 2019, if you will, 2018, 2017, to help build consensus in the community, but also get all these different experts within the field. And Gabe brought a lot of different things to the table. So I thank him for this opportunity as well. And I think he's got me scheduled to do another one of these presentations in June. So good deal. But Jonathan, thank you for the time the other night. This is the first time I've actually done a Zoom meeting from this perspective, I've been on many on the other end because I retired right just as COVID was kicking up in 2019. So a lot's been going on. But anyway, I'm going to go through this. I've got a lot of information. I'm going to skim through it as quickly as I can. And so give you plenty of time to ask questions. I've got a couple of videos that I've done and whatnot for different groups and whatnot. But anyway, so the topic today is drones are everywhere and why is this a problem? I don't know so much that this is a problem, but we're going to talk about all kinds of different things. All right, so introduction, objectives. We've got some video clips to show, and we're going to do some Q&A at the end of this. And Jonathan already kind of touched on my the career. That's actually a shot of Fox 5 when we were actually in the process of bringing the program to the county. That's actually their drone that you see, and that's their.
Has anybody ever seen a photograph photobombed by a drone?
That's right. That's a first. That's a first. The objectives for me today for you is basically to identify what one of these things are, and I'll refer, there's acronyms, and all of you live with acronyms, but I'll hit on the acronyms, but I'll refer to everything as drones. But what is this that we're talking about? What are the requirements for you to go out and fly one of these? Because there's a lot more of it that you probably don't realize for those of you who don't own a drone. There's a lot of things you're supposed to be doing. What types of safety measures? That's a big concern with people is how safe are these things? And then also talk about the basic levels of legislation, local, state, and federal, because there's some interesting things that have been going on in the last 6 months nationwide. The other big buzzword is the Chinese drones and what's the concerns. We'll talk about that for a few minutes. And then what are some of the evolving trends and threats? All right, so what is a small unmanned aircraft system, SUAS? So there's two components to this. Number one, first bullet, it is basically, it's the aircraft that is operated without the possibility of human intervention. That is a drone that you see sitting there, and then the controller. I don't know if you can see, but here is a drone, and here is its controller. And that's simply what this is. The system is all those pieces together. The drone by itself is the unmanned aircraft. The system is that controller, the drone, and any other kind of linkage that you have set up. But I would tell you right now, those two components are all you need to fly your drone. Here's some different examples. The top left corner is one that you're starting to see a little bit more of, is delivery of packages such as medications and things like that. All the others are different. There's a military style drone in the lower right-hand corner, second from the right. And then the one that you see nestled between the military drone and then that one that you just saw on the left, that middle funky looking thing, that's a DJI Avata. That's an FPV. It's first person, meaning you fly this with goggles. And I've got one of those, and it's a really, really cool experience. Here's some more examples of what that SUAS package looks like. So, you know, different kits with different propellers. There's a different controller you see at the bottom center, and then you have something a lot more sophisticated on the right-hand side. What can you do with these? And a lot of people don't realize what flexibility that these things have. So it is a new platform for photographers. They've been around for, I guess, 2015, 2014, if not sooner. Real estate photography, critical infrastructure, bridges, highways, pipelines, etc. Farm and agricultural. Some of the larger drones now are equipped with spraying capabilities, so you can actually create chemicals, do crop assessments, land assessments. Construction, progress, identify issues, personal use, recreation and hobby, delivery we talked about, warehouse delivery, grocery, medical. Amazon had talked about this for probably about 6 years. They spent a lot of money trying to get a program together. I don't know that they're going any further with it right now because there's a lot of concerns and issues with making this really happen. First person view racing. If you've never looked at a YouTube video of FPV drone racing, you ought to check it out. It's very, very interesting. These guys go 100+ miles an hour when they're flying their drones and do some really crazy things, you know, within a matter of milliseconds. Sporting events, you're starting to see those being used at different capacities, enhanced 3D mapping, and then, of course, sky productions. And all of you have been seeing this of late. These different companies like IBM, some of the Chinese groups have been doing all these 4th of July, instead of fireworks, they're doing these drone presentations. Really spectacular. From the public safety side, and this was my bread and butter, if you will, for the last couple of years of my career, was to actually get this particular program up and running. But these are the bullet points that we actually pushed to our board. You can do personal accountability or personnel accountability, fire, post, and blast investigations, because you can put a drone sometimes in a place where a human can't be. Monitoring fireworks shoots, swiftwater operations, hazardous material response. You can equip these drones with sensors, and some of the ones that we had in Fairfax before I left actually had sensors. You could actually fly up to that tractor trailer that was carrying hazmat and actually do a full assessment without impacting anybody and having those guys get into those full encapsulated suits. Help with pre-planning of structures, search and rescue, both for missing persons or other recovery, stream and water management, aerial mapping, crash reconstruction. I know when I left, Fairfax County was getting ready to start doing crash reconstruction with drone. They can do the process much quicker because of the technology that the drones are capable of doing. Terrain mapping, wildlife population estimates. Animal control can go out there and assess where the deer populations are and things like that. And then again, one of the big claim to fame of drones is that damage assessment, such as flooding, tornado, and other weather-driven events. And all of you have seen those on TV where they've flown the drones to see where the flooding is and the tornado damage, etc. So there's a lot of this. This is a lot of minutia detail. I'm going to skim through this very quickly. But so you own a drone now. What do you do next? And there are some requirements. Okay, the federal government is not going to let you just go fly by yourself. So first off, if your drone is more than 250 grams, or in other words, 0.55 pounds, you must register it with the FAA. And there's a website to go on there. It costs you $5. It's good for 2 years. Then 5 years or 2 years later, you renew it. Again, another $5. Once you have registered that drone, just like a general aviation aircraft or any kind of commercial aircraft, you must identify the FAA number on that aircraft on the exterior. So in most cases, and I'll show you on mine real quick. Again, if you can see it, I've got basically a label maker that I put my number on there. And the reason you do that is if it gets lost, or if somebody from law enforcement or the FAA comes out and wants to see it, it's identified and you're good to go. Now, a lot of the manufacturers are creating drones that are 250 grams or less to get away from you having to register. So that's fine. However, if you do anything to that drone that pushes it up to 251 grams, you must now register it. FAA Drone Zone is the site you do this. There's an app you can download, and actually Before You Fly has changed. They're a partnership with the FAA, but they've actually got 5 or 6 different apps now that are tied in with this. Look at the FAA website for detailed information. Look at YouTube videos. There's so much information about what and how you can fly a drone. And now there's 2 avenues to fly a drone. If you're just a citizen who wants to go out there and have fun with it, do some cool photography and some video and things like that, then you need to do Avenue 1, which is the trust side of the house. And I'll talk about that in a minute. And if you are a person who wants to do this professionally, or maybe make a few bucks selling videos or pictures or shooting a roof for somebody, collecting a few dollars or real estate, whatever, then you need to go the Part 107 route. But regardless, there are rules and you need to follow them. Okay, recreational pilot. This is the person who buys the drone. There's no age stipulation. So if your 5-year-old, 10-year-old has one of these at Christmas time, they want to go fly it, they can fly it. But again, there's requirements. Number 1, they can only fly for recreational purposes only. In other words, you can't go out there and do this for money. That's a whole other category. Personal enjoyment. There's safety guidelines. They're all online with the FAA website to talk about it. A lot of the guidelines are geared toward these community-based organizations, CBOs, and they're all over the country. There's a couple of them in Fairfax County. In fact, I think Gabe is affiliated with one of them. You must fly visual line of sight. In other words, you're looking at your screen in front of you, but you have to continually look at that drone to make sure you can see it. You can never let it fly beyond where you can physically see it. Something new the FAA came out with, I guess it was about a year and a half ago, is this trust thing. Okay, you now must, as a recreational pilot, which means everybody has to have this. Okay, you have to take this test, and I'll talk about that more in the next slide. You have to fly at 400 feet or less in Class G uncontrolled airspace. In Fairfax County, Northern Virginia, it's a freaking nightmare. If any of you fly already, there's so much Class B, Class C, there's a little bit of Class G, but there's the big ugly duck called Washington, D.C., and the thing called the FRZ, the Flight Restriction Zone. And that is basically a zone that starts at National Airport, extends out 15 miles, and then another 15 miles to a total of 30. That first 15-mile circle, if you will, if you can look at a map of what Washington looks like, nobody is supposed to fly a drone in that 15-mile circle, period. Unless you're public safety and you've gotten some waivers. Commercial person can actually get a waiver as well, but majority of people can never ever fly it. The other part, that 15 miles out to 30 miles, is a lot less restrictive, but you still need to get permission to fly in that airspace. And we'll talk about that more in a minute. And again, as I said, with a recreational pilot, the trust, there's no age restrictions. So here's a little bit about the test. It basically requires that all flyers pass the knowledge test. This, I think, is a great thing because it's just like anything else. You want to have the person understand what they're doing, understand some of the rules, because you can pose a danger to people if you fly these things and hit somebody in the face. It does give you some very basic education. The third bullet is very important. It is free online, and it's 100% correctable. So in other words, and I can't remember the number of questions there are, maybe 50 or so, 40 of them. Each time you take the test, you have to get 100%. So if you go through and answer all the questions and you miss 5 of them, it will take you back to the 5 that you missed and give you a second chance to answer those. Then you reprocess the test. If you take it a third time, it'll take it back to just the questions you missed that second time. So if you only miss 2, it'll only take you back to the 2. In other words, you have to get 100% before you can get your certificate. Easy said. Okay, this is the a little bit more in depth. Well, it's a lot more in depth. This is the certificated pilots part 107. The picture you see there is actually what this looks like. This is an official remote pilot certificate. General aviation, commercial pilots all have something very similar to this. So they're treating this as a lot of a big deal. Certificated pilots must be at least 16. You must be able to read, write, and speak English and understand it. You must be in physical and mental condition to fly a UAS. This is considered now an aircraft. You cannot, as a person, shoot down one of these things. You can't destroy one of these things. If your neighbor's flying it in your neighborhood, you can't hit it, you can't destroy it. If you do, it's either going to be considered a class 1 felony, or I'm sorry, class 6 felony, or it's going to be a misdemeanor depending on where you are. So you can't touch these things. They are considered aircraft. The physical and mental condition, there's actually requirements. If you want to go out and have a beer drinking fest or just have one beer, the basic adage is a bottle of throttle is a minimum of 8 hours. So even if you drink just one beer, you cannot fly legally under Certificate 107, Part 107, for 8 hours. And if you're on medication that will impact you, you can't fly. Just like a commercial pilot, they can't do this either. Here's the rules. It's 14 CFR. You need to pass the initial acknowledged exam. We'll talk about that, I think, on the next slide. It's a reoccurrent testing now. So you take your test, and that's good for 2 years. And then you have to take a recurrent test 2 more years later, and then every 2 years until FAA changes it. About 4,500 people apply for this test and take it, and about 0.7% don't pass or reject it. All right, to take the test, and I will tell you, I've taken it. It's not easy, and there's a lot of work you have to do ahead of time because you learn a lot about general aviation. You must score 70% or higher. It's 60 questions. You have 2 hours to fill it. There's maps you have to look at. There's math you have to do. There's all kinds of stuff. It's $175 per appointment. What that means is you take the test. If you fail it and you have to come back and retake it, which you would have to do, it's another $175. So it's not a cheap endeavor, but again, majority of people pass this thing, and it's a good thing. Topics include regulations. It talks about airspace classification, operating requirements, flight restrictions, weather, loading. Again, a lot of the information you're getting and learning of this is the same exact information that general aviation person is learning to fly a Cessna 172 or whatever. And again, for the commercial operators as well. So you have a humongous knowledge base when it's all said and done. There's a lot of restrictions and requirements that you as a Part 107 must do. Again, your max altitude is 400. However, that's negotiable depending on the circumstance. So if you're flying a structure that stands, say, 300 feet tall, you can actually fly up to that top and then another 400 feet on top of that. So there's some stipulations there. You also have to fly a visual line of sight. However, that's also negotiable depending on the circumstances. All the aircraft, if I can get this thing to light up for us, must have anti-collision lighting. And if you're flying at the evening or nighttime hours, you must have strobe lights on this that can be seen for 3 nautical miles. So again, I'll throw this up here. We can see the lights really well. But yeah, they're flashing. So anyway, all the drones you can buy today have a basic light structure on there. They're set up just like aircraft and boats, green's on the right, and then red's on the left. You must fly at 100 miles an hour or less. The FPV drone I showed you in the pictures earlier actually will fly up to 94 miles an hour. And I will tell you that's a kick in the pants if you're sitting there with your goggles on and you're flying this thing. You're also allowed to operate multiple drones, but again, there's stipulations. You must also yield the right of way. I do a lot of flying out here in Brandy Station in Culpeper County, and I'm right next to the Culpeper Airport. It is an uncontrolled airport. However, I have to get a waiver each time I fly there because it's a very, very busy uncontrolled airport. So I have to be very attentive to what's going on. And if I see somebody coming or whatever, I need to drop the drone or move it out of the way or whatever the case may be. Because even with my floodlights on, an aircraft is, taking off or landing, they're doing, 100 plus knots. It's still my responsibility to get that out of the way. There's operating limits, and I already talked to speed. Airspace restrictions. The map on the right is basically a nautical chart. And this basically is what you have to learn how to read. And it's very, very confusing, as you can see, but this is the Washington nautical chart. Right dead center is National Airport. And you can see those rings I was telling about as they extend outward toward Manassas, Woodbridge, and Loudoun County and Dulles Airport. And again, you are tested on this. So you need to understand what all the different numbers are and the mountain heights and the tower heights and all that good stuff and direction. There are some other exceptions of the 107. Okay, you can now move, you can operate from a moving vehicle. This was lifted slightly so you could do the delivery piece. You can now operate at night. So you can fly your drone pretty much within reason at nighttime, again, with the 3 mile an hour strobe light, and also, be able to take these kinds of pictures. These are all drone pictures. Operation over human beings. Up until a year and a half, 2 years ago, you could not fly over anybody. Now you can, again, with exceptions. There's detailed information. Again, I'm not going to go into it at this point. Safety measures. And again, some of these pictures, these are all ones I've done, but you can see the capabilities. That little drone I showed you a few minutes ago, that's actually the one that I used to fly these. So I mean, the quality is just ridiculous, what you're going to get out of this. And this is a $500, $600 drone. Safety measures. So again, the government is very, very much on the topic as far as making sure that we all are safe. Again, they came out with the trust piece a year and a half ago. One of the new requirements they started a year and a half ago, it's been talked about for several years, is remote ID. Remote ID basically is the ability for the drone to put out a signal that persons of interest, like law enforcement, the FAA, and others, can actually pick up information about who you are, what the drone is, where you're taking off from, and monitor it in case there's issues with how you fly and things like that. It actually it went into effect last year, but because a lot of the major drone manufacturers hadn't finished their software firmware updates, it's technically wasn't going to be enforceable, but it is now enforceable. As of just a couple days ago, actually, March 16th. Any drone is required to be registered with the FAA. Any drone, so what it's saying basically is any drone registered with the FAA required to be registered. In other words, the 250 grams or greater must comply, must have the ability to do this. Any drone in flight must provide the ID and location information that can be received by other parties through broadcast. And again, it lays the foundation for safety and security in more complex drone operations. And then, yeah. Here are the 3 components, if you will, of remote ID. So on the first one, on the left-hand side, all the drones I fly are DJI. A lot of the manufacturers have built-in software now that allows this to be automatically done. the FAA had to give a little bit more time to big manufacturers like DJI and Parrot and others to make sure that their drones were already updated. Everything I own now has a ability, so I don't have to do anything. I had to go back into the FAA website and put in there that here's my new drone ID, so it's in there. The middle one is basically you buy a module, and they're not cheap. They're 90, 100, 200 bucks depending on what kind you get. And if you have an aircraft that's older, and one of the ones I did have, I thought I was going to have to get a module. Turns out DJI went ahead and updated anyway. But anyway, here is an actual module. This was 80 bucks. And basically you fix it to the aircraft, you register with the company, and then you have the information. And anytime that flies, you turn it on, and basically that information is being broadcast. The third component over on the right is drones without remote ID. So if your drone is a non-registerable drone and you're flying for recreation, or you're just flying in certain areas, you can fly a non-remote ID drone, in certain geographic areas. And I'll hit that in a second. Anyway, and I already talked about this. Here's a standard remote ID drone, what it gives you, the broadcast module, what it gives you. And that third one I was just talking about is the FRIA. Again, another abbreviation, Recognized Identification Area. It's a geographic area where drones can be flown without remote ID equipment. So you can go to the FAA website, check it out, see what's going on. So again, Big Brother is looking out for you. And on one hand, I think it's a great idea. It's been a nightmare for a lot of us trying to get the manufacturers up to speed so our remote IDs were in effect, but they are now in effect. If you don't, and you fly without your thing and you are caught, I think it's a $17,500 fine by the FAA. Local law enforcement typically are not going to force this. This is more the FAA's deal, but it is something that is out there.
Roy, could I just interrupt and say
yes.
that of all of the acronyms you've bandied about, at least FRIA is an acronym that sounds like what it is.
There you go. Exactly. There you go. Well, here's a couple more for you. So a lot of the manufacturers have built in a significant number of safety features in their drones. Advanced pilot assistance, directing objects in flight paths, obstacle avoidance. So on my little DJI Mini 3 Pro, again, it's hard to tell on these pictures, but you see these two clear glass sections. You see two more on the top. This one is set up to do bottom and forward looking. Basically, those are obstacle avoidance sensors. So it's basically set up so that if I get close to trees or other objects, it's going to warn me. And if I've got it set up, it'll stop mid-flight. So again, it's taking some of your worries about crashing off the table. However, it's like anything else. You still need to make sure you're paying attention. RTH, return to home. I've used this a half a dozen times and it works beautifully. If you're flying and your drone gets out there and you're over some trees and you just don't have the greatest signal, if it loses signal, the system will automatically go into return to home. So it will automatically go up to the altitude that you preset. In my case, it's about 180 feet, depending on where I'm flying and how tall the trees or whatever it is, and then start coming right back. Everything is geocoded. GPS is with these things, so it's just the technology is just amazing. It'll also return to home if the signal loss, like I mentioned, or it gets down to a low battery. Typically, it's at 20%. It will automatically start coming back. Now, you can override it, but this is an opportunity here that is going to help its safety. Automated flight modes. I will tell you, again, and I could go on this stuff for hours, but the flight modes that you can do on these drones is just ridiculous. I can set it up to do tracks. If I want to do a whole search of a field, I can set up points and then hit go. It will take off automatically. I can just set the remote control down and it will fly this field, taking pictures or video, whichever I choose. When it gets low on the battery, it'll come right back, land. All I need to do is replace the battery, turn it back on and hit start and resume. It'll automatically take off again and then continue that pattern where it left off. And then it will stitch all of this together with no issues. So for search and rescue or doing some kind of field assessment or real estate, it's ridiculous. A lot of the models have built-in propeller guards, and some of them don't. You can add them. The ones I use, I don't use the propeller guards except for that FPV drone, the DJI Avata. The other big thing is geofencing, and I'm going to touch on that for just a quick minute. Geofencing is something that really came out. I don't know if you all remember it back in, I believe it was 2013, where that drone flew across the White House fence and hit the White House and landed. That was a DJI drone. I can't remember the model. It was Model 3. It was owned by a doctor. Anyway, in order to prevent that from happening, DJI created a geofencing capability. It's a nightmare for me. It's a pain in the ass, excuse my French. But what it does, though, if you look at the map I have shown there, and you see those kind of those orangish looking circles, what happens is if I want to fly a DJI drone, this only applies to DJI, and I think Parrot has switched over to this as well. But of those two companies, if you want to fly in those areas, you first must go online and to their respective sites and then tell them why you want to do it, what you're going to do, how high you're going to fly, and request permission to have it unlocked. And for me, I have to do that every time I fly at Culpeper Airport. But the nice thing is once it's done, I can go fly there for the period of time they've unlocked it. And typically it's 48 hours. So, for example, I did a lot of stuff with the Civil War reenactment this past June. I'll show you a couple of video clips. I had to go unlock it each time to fly because technically I could fly and land on that runway if I wanted to now. But other manufacturers, okay, Autel, it wasn't Parrot, it's Autel. For example, Skydio, which is one of the only US made companies, I can fly that thing anywhere. There's no geofencing built in whatsoever. So on one hand, it's not very safe. On the other hand, it's a whole much easier to fly because you don't have that restriction. So that is a huge thing that the DJI drones do that only Autel and DJI do. Okay, additional safety measures. DJI, again, is my bread and butter. I've flown those things for 8 years now, but firmware and software are constantly being updated, new enhancements, new safety. The strobe and navigation lighting I talked about. I'm going to skip ADS-B. Temporary flight restrictions and notice to airmen. These are FAA terms that are done at airports or in geographic areas that you as a drone pilot need to check before you fly, because a lot of times if the president's flying somewhere, they will put flight restrictions up in that area and you can't fly your drones. Now, can you fly your drone? Is it going to stop you from doing it? No. You can actually get up there and fly it. However, you're now be violating a federal law and you could go to jail, you could be fined, et cetera, et cetera. When I did the Civil War event in June of last year, it was the 160th reenactment of Brandy Station Cavalry Battle. We put a NOTAM out for 2 days because we flew on Saturday and Sunday, and I had 3 drones flying at one time, constantly, all day long. Yeah, and I had an FAA observer from the airport that was assigned to me to monitor the air traffic so I could make sure I was flying in a safe manner. So that's the other thing. The other neat thing is the third bullet. ADS-B, and again, if you're a pilot, you already know what this is. This is a feature that a lot of the newer drones have. All of my DJI drones have this. And basically what it does is it monitors, and you see a little schematic above it, picture of what this thing does. It recognizes the signal coming out of the transponder of the aircraft, whether it's a small single engine or a commercial or whatever, broadcasts satellite, then broadcasts out. And then these receivers actually can pick this up. So if I'm flying at Culpeper or somewhere else, I actually will see on my screen a little icon of a plane. It won't tell me it's an American Airlines or whatever, dating myself, Eastern Airlines, whatever. But it will tell me that there's an airplane in the area. It's traveling at whatever direction and what the altitude is. And that's pretty cool. So that's another feature that's built in to help you as a pilot fly safe. All right, legislation. There's not a whole lot of local out there, okay? But all federal drone laws, FAA drone laws, are applicable in all localities within Virginia and every other state, period. Again, part of my public safety background when I retired in 2019, the Fairfax County Park Authority, by virtue, they can take the drone laws and restrict even further, not by creating a new law, but creating regulation. And so they did do that. So in certain parks you can fly, certain parks you cannot fly. And that's what they did. The state law gives them authority to do that. There are heavy restrictions in Fairfax County due to Washington, D.C. flight restricted zone. I talked about that earlier. And it was very difficult getting that program up and running and approved because, again, part of Fairfax County was within that In fact, 55% of it was in that 15-mile window with National Airport. I'm not going to read any of this stuff. So in the Commonwealth of Virginia, there's all kinds of legislation. The first one basically says the political subdivision may by ordinance or regulation regulate the takeoff and landing of the aircraft. This is what our parks did. 19.2-60.1 is the one that we developed our public safety program from. And there's more to this. This is only a snapshot of it, but there's all of the components as far as what you can and cannot do with a drone. In the end of year one, we actually got a change to the law to make it easier for us to fly the drones in a public safety manner. But anyway, that's what it looks like. Here's another piece of the pie. The Commonwealth of Virginia has said on a local level, you cannot fly drones in Virginia state parks. On a federal level, you cannot fly in a federal state park either, unless you get a special use permit, and they're very difficult to get. Okay, state legislation. We're going to hit, since we hit the Virginia one, this is Florida. Florida has become it's a nightmare for drone operators. And Florida typically is a great place to fly drones because of the damage from hurricanes and things like that. However, last year they passed Senate Bill 44 in 2021, and then now it's considered Section 934.50, went into effect last April. It bans Florida government agencies from using drones made by a foreign country of concern, i.e. DJI. DJI, Autel, and a few others. DJI is the largest one in the world, period. Nobody can touch them. 75% of the market is owned by DJI. But anyway, it bans the government agencies from using them. Police departments are not happy because they've spent hundreds of thousands of dollars in federal tax dollars by grants and other means to buy these things. And I will tell you, and again, having been through this process, and I'm a DJI owner, they are just a fantastic drone. And we'll talk about the security issues, and that's on everybody's mind. But the majority of non-Chinese drones are inferior. They're not that good. They can't hold a candle to the Parrot, for example, and also, I'm sorry, not Parrot, but Autel and also DJI. Only 5 companies in the state of Florida are allowed to be flown by the government agencies. Now, you as a citizen are not impacted yet. And there's the 5 on the right-hand side. Vantage Robotics, Teal Drones, they're really mainly a defense contractor drone. Altivan was purchased recently by FLIR, which is that forward-looking infrared radar, the guys who do all the heat stuff. And then Parrot and Skydio. Skydio is the only real true U.S. company that can compete with DJI. However, they still are not to that level or even close to it. They're not as reliable. They were a public. I actually bought a Skydio when it came out because they were actually a real nice drone. They do have the best sensor capabilities. You can actually ride your bike in the forest and fly that thing behind you, and it will track you and not hit a tree or tree limb. It's really, really good. The DJI is getting better, but it can't hold a candle to the Skydio. However, last year, Skydio announced they're no longer going to support the public drone, the Skydio 2, which is the one I own and I got rid of. So what that means basically is they moved everything they're doing, all the software, all their technology, to focus on public safety. And you kind of get an idea where all this is going. Federal legislation. So the National Defense Authorization Act, which is the one that talks about all the money for the military and all this kind of stuff, there's a piece in there now. It's called the American Security Drone Act. This is brand new. It now prohibits any federal agency from purchasing any Chinese-made drone with federal dollars. It does not apply to localities. However, again, with us in Fairfax, when I was there, we applied for a couple of federal grant dollars to help buy some of our drones. We can't do that anymore. And when we go to a recycle rate, have to refresh these things, we're not going to be able to do that anymore. We have to come up with some other funding. It does not pertain to the general public. And I put that yet, because I've heard and I've seen lots of dialogues about potentially the federal government wanting to go one step further and actually banning the public from using these Chinese-made drones. And again, it's not just DJI. Again, DJI has the largest market, but that would be a catastrophic event for all the hundreds of thousands of drone users in the country. It's a large impact to public safety because the DJI product, and no, I don't work for them, never did, And no, I'm not a China supporter. However, it's a product for me that works beautifully as well as public safety. Now it gets kind of funny. Federal agencies engaged in search and rescue, SAR, and wildlife management are exempt. So if you are in one of these federal agencies and you want to fly and buy drones with federal dollars, you can, because they recognize how good this stuff is. Go figure. And then there is a waiver process for other agencies who want to use these drones. Okay, let's talk about the China syndrome. So here's some of the concerns that everybody voices. It's another tool for China to spy on the United States. There's concerns that the video and photographic images, along with other sensitive data, are being captured and easily accessed by the Chinese government. They look at DJI in the same context as TikTok, and I'm sure with you, what you all do, you're familiar with TikTok and all the concerns that are going on with that. And of course, the final piece is fear of Chinese influence across the United States remains high. Back, you can see here's some dates. There's been multiple federal agencies in the country, along with outside agencies that have done cybersecurity stress testing with DJI products. Yeah, DJI, by the way, stands for Daijing Innovations. Here's an example of some of the audits that were done. Recently, in 2022, U.S. Department of Commerce, a federal agency did one. FTI Consulting, which is a federal government contracted consulting, and did one in 2020. Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a huge Beltway bandit here in Northern Virginia, in 2020 also did one. The Idaho National Laboratory, on behalf of DHS, did one in 2019, U.S. Department of Interior in 2019 as well. Here are the findings, abbreviated. They're all consistent. DJI cybersecurity privacy practices are sound. There is nothing going out unless if you set your drone up to allow anybody outside to have access to certain things, then yes, you can provide DJI with data about where you are, what you're doing, access to the films, and all that kind of stuff. But otherwise, if you say no, they're not getting it. And that was a big thing we needed to make sure was solid when we did our program. And we talked to DJI, we talked to other public safety entities in Virginia and across the country. And we were very comfortable with what we got back from that. Evolving threats. So you see this is upside down, but you can see there's a grenade affixed to this particular drone. So right now there's events taking place across the world. And obviously all of you already know this. We have massive interdiction issues at the Super Bowls. They have lots of interdiction capabilities at the Super Bowls. In fact, the last Washington, D.C. police chief, she was hired by the NFL to go and help with this stuff. But I mean, they have all kinds of threat assessment capabilities at these games. They also have abilities to take down drones and things like that. Drone swarms, you're seeing that in the Middle East. You're seeing our ships being attacked. You obviously see the Ukraine and Russian war, and there's video, Twitter, all kinds of stuff on there. And there's a lot of issues at the southern border, which a lot of people don't realize. But then you also have the stupidity threat. And most of you probably heard about this. This was back in 2017, where somebody was flying their DJI Phantom and it collided with a Huey Blackhawk. And it actually sustained some pretty good damage to the main rotor blade, window frame, and transmission deck. It had to do with emergency landing. This guy that was flying this was flying on the coast of New York, but he was flying in an illegal area. He flew it beyond his line of sight, so he could not actually see it. So it was an accident waiting to happen. And so he was charged, and again, it's stupidity. And you see these all the time, unfortunately, where people are flying near airports, trying to get that shot of that 747 landing or flying and whatnot. Those people are stupid, but these are some of the threats out there that you have to watch for. Domestic. Terrorist groups are using drones in surveillance activities and delivering chem bio. That is a threat concern. And some of that is actually taking place now. Concern with environmental groups who are taking those hobby drones and going into secure airspace, whether it's critical infrastructure, military, or whatever, and crash it. And you're seeing that right now overseas. Criminal organizations use the drones to transport illegal substances. That's taking place now. We have issues with people coming into prisons on a regular basis, flying drones with contraband and other things like that. Hacking. Yeah, yes, there's lots of capability in these drones to prevent this. However, you can still get into these things. And if you look at bullet 2 with a packet analyzer or sniffer, someone can actually get in there and decode this, or they can jam the signal, or they can hijack it using a Raspberry Pi capability, box, and then do what they need to do with the drone. And of course, there's GPS spoofing, et cetera, et cetera. Evolving threats, Middle East. So here we go. This is stuff that's going on now. Last November, drone strike on a Liberian flag commercial ship. October 17th, 2023, they launched a drone strike on Al Asad Air Base. October 18th, drone strike by Iranian proxy on Al Tanif garrison. 20 people were injured. In November of last year, drone attack on Al Harir Air Base, hosting U.S. forces in northern Iraq. Last November, U.S. forces were struck 3 separate times in 24 hours. In January of this year, a USV, unmanned surface vessel, launched from a Houthi-controlled Yemen, got within a couple of miles of U.S. Navy and commercial vessel. And in January of this year, U.S. and British naval forces shot down 21 drones and missiles. You probably all heard about that. So again, there's a ton of stuff going on. Again, January, another attack on another ship. On the 28th of January, Arrow drone strike killed 3 service members. You all heard that. That's a picture of the base that they were at, Tower 22. 47 other people injured. And that was an Iranian-made Shahed drone, which is the same kind that are being used right now in the events taking place over in the Ukraine and Russia. And on February 4th, again, not too long ago, a drone attack on a base housing U.S. troops in eastern Syria killed 6 Kurdish fighters. A couple of things you may not be aware of, this just happened a couple months ago, is Langley Air Force Base, joint base for Langley and Eustis. They had sightings of drones over their airspace starting in December. This continued for several weeks, and it wasn't just one drone, it was multiple. It was drone swarms, variety of sizes and configurations. They did no hostile attacks. They were all within restricted airspace, but they don't know where they came from, and they don't know what the intent was. So that just happened. This just came out literally last week. At a Senate Armed Service Committee last week, Air Force General Gregory Goulet of NORAD, et cetera, has been saying that there's been more than 1,000 drones per month crossing into U.S. airspace at the U.S.-Mexican border. Mexican cartels have been using them with the track location of authorities to help with getting people over, get the drugs, things like that. In addition, last February, in 2023, one of the patrol agents mentioned that, and again, this kind of jives with what the general has said, that more than 10,000 drone incursions and 25 sightings were reported in 2023 alone. And again, the adversaries have 17 times the number of drones that are available to the U.S. side of the house. Of course, all the staffing and everything else. So I mean, again, these are all real world events taking place today with the drones. They're here to stay. Again, I could go into much, much greater detail, but we basically need to embrace this technology, and I think we are, but we need to use it to support not only the individual user, but for the greater good. And that's it. And then I'll show you some video clips here in just a second. Is there any question?
Roy. Yeah, Roy, thanks so much. Sam, are you available?
Yes, I am.
Yeah, so Sam Nuts and I've asked to do the kind of Q&A from the chat with you, Roy, okay?
Sure.
Yeah, go ahead, Sam.
Okay, so we could kind of start from the bottom. Gabe Goldberg just asked a question. Does the NFL have a waiver to take down drones that are intruding? And I believe the answer would be no. The NFL, just like the NCAA or Major League Baseball, operates an event, and some events are designated as national security, for protecting those events. And so they have the FAA issues a NOTAM, a notice to airmen, and temporarily prohibits flights within a radius around those events, including drones. Any interdiction, when you talk about taking down a drone, would have to be by an authorized, government agency. Generally, what they're doing is just preventing it, and then they can take enforcement actions. So if you recall, there's been a couple times in the last few years where someone flew into an NFL stadium And in both of those sort of fairly widely publicized cases, those folks were found. They are facing some pretty massive fines, in addition to never being able to fly a drone legally again, or quite possibly an aircraft. It's, violating a NOTAM like that and endanger flying over people is a pretty significant offense.
So Sam, let's see what Roy has to say about that.
No, you're spot on. They are designated as NSSE events depending on what level they have. However, and I went to one of the presentations by her when after she had left and went to the NFL when I was out in California. And so the authorities that you referenced are correct. There are authorities and capabilities that are brought to the NFL games, or in this case, the Super Bowl, which can interdict and take these things down. So that capability is there. So those entities are authorized by the federal government to do that. So they do have that ability to do that if needed. 100% spot on. But everything else, I mean, again, all of it was 100% spot. And thank you, Gabe. Hope you're doing well, sir.
I am. Thank you for this brilliant presentation. This was a lot of fun. And I'm from New York, so I listen fast. And you talk fast, so I like that.
You've heard me talk for many a year, though.
Yes.
Okay, other questions? I know there's a ton of stuff on these chats. So it seems like a trend in doing sophisticated air displays using drone. Is there a worry going forward about hacking? I would say the short answer is yes. All of that technology, although there's multiple frequencies on these controllers controlling the aircraft, a lot of them now, and again, I may be wrong, but when they first started doing all this a couple of years ago, IBM was one that was doing all these multiple drones with all these cool displays, but everybody and their brother was doing these now. I think majority of them are not controlled per se by a controller. It's all computer animated, done, programmed internally into that drone, and once it goes, it goes. Is there an opportunity to still hack into that? I don't know. But I know pretty much all of those things are pretty much programmed ahead of time. And again, I guess if somebody has access to it and they can, scramble what the signal is, they can do whatever they need to do. But yeah.
So what's the situation in Maryland parks, Roy?
I don't know the answer to that question. I know in Fairfax, Fairfax County parks have designated actually a couple of places you can fly drones, and they actually have, and they're all in consult with the RC folks, the airplanes and things like that. But their restrictions mostly are not because they don't want you to fly there. It's because of the FRZ, that flight restriction zone. And unfortunately, a big chunk of Fairfax County parks fly within that. So it's not that the county parks are saying no. It's because the federal regulations say you cannot under any circumstances. I would say the same thing applies to Maryland. If that Maryland park is within that, first it's a 15-mile zone from National Airport, and there will be some of Maryland in there. You cannot fly at all. It doesn't matter who you are, unless you get a waiver. And that takes some time sometimes. If it's beyond that into that extra 15 miles, you could probably fly. But again, I don't know about the parks. Again, the local jurisdictions in Virginia or Maryland may do something a little bit different than Virginia. The federal thing only I know for certain is you cannot fly any state park, period. State park, a federal park. So if you go down to Shenandoah National Park and try and fly it, you can if you have a drone that's capable and it's not geofenced like the DJI stuff I have. And if you're caught, it's a serious fine. The FAA can fine you, local law enforcement can fine you, but in this case, it'd be the FAA, and take you to jail. And again, are they going to do that? Most likely not, but you probably will get a fine. You could lose your license if you have a license and go from there. So yeah, I just don't know about Maryland. I would just Google that county that you live in and see what it comes back and says.
Yeah. So Roy, there is a related question, and then we'll go to Joe for the next one. TK asked a question, and I've got an answer for this, and then you can give your answer. We'll see if they wind up agreeing. TK asks related, this causes me confusion in Maryland because I can't tell if I'm allowed to fly in parks, even though the state says their drone law preempts local drone laws. And my answer would be is that airspace is owned by the federal government and managed by the FAA, full stop. Now, having said that, any municipality, any state can prohibit you from taking off and landing in their parks or in any real estate that they control. That means they can tell you you can't take off from a Maryland state park. However, you can take off where you are legally allowed outside of a Maryland state park, overfly it, provided it's not in another FAA prohibited area like the FRZ, and then leave and land outside of it. So no drone zones are a really sketchy area. And my caveat would be, while that is all I believe correct and legal, you may run into people, including local law enforcement, that absolutely do not understand any of that subtlety. And so I would encourage you, if you are directed by a law enforcement officer to land a drone or to stop operating a drone, you do not win that argument at that time. You comply, and then you take your logs and the laws, and you have a discussion with that organization and with the FAA, and you improve their understanding once the drone's on the ground. You don't argue while the drone's in the air. Conversely, no one, whether they're a LEO or not, should ever interfere with a pilot in command of a remote vehicle. They need to allow that vehicle to be operated safely and brought to the ground, and then have that conversation. Maybe Roy can weigh in on the other side of that.
You're 100% on this. I know in Virginia, there's, like I said, I showed you on the one slide that there is code out there that makes that clear for the locality to adjust that. And you're right. I mean, it is how you read the law and how you interpret it. You cannot, the parks can sit there and set up a code or an ordinance or regulation saying you can't take off from the park. But as you said, and you're dead on, you can certainly fly over the park and into the park, and there's nothing anybody can do to stop that. And that's dead on. I know there are jurisdictions and cities and things like that across the country, I've at least read about it, that actually prohibit drones from being flown, period. So it's just like anything else. If you're going to fly a drone where you live, check the local ordinances, check the state ordinances and see what there is. Calling local law enforcement is interesting. And this is something that Gabe and I had to talk about and we had to deal with back in the day when Dave Rohr was our advisor, is most cops don't have a clue what the regulations are and how they can enforce them. So one of the things that we were starting to do, and I know from talking to some of my points of contact from back in the day, is again, I've been retired for 4 years, is they started doing roll call training. They created small little cheat sheets, if you will, of the ordinances and what they can and cannot do. So if they get calls that somebody's flying a drone, they're doing this and that and all that. The other point I wanted to throw in there real quick is the NAS, the National Airspace. That is a hot topic. And even when I was doing the presentations in front of our board, and we talked about, what's legally, where can I legally fly? Well, technically, and you said it, the FAA, everything from the surface up, and again, there's different altitudes depending on airspace, controlled versus uncontrolled, is owned by the federal government, the FAA, and it is controlled by them. So technically, if the airspace starts at the top of your blade of grass and goes on up, you can fly it. Unless there's a specific ordinance or way or whatever the case may be that may be in place for that. And I even had one of my board members when I was presenting say, well, I got a guy who flies it near my house all the time. We'll go out there and swat it with a broom and take it down. That's a federal offense. You can't do that.
Yeah, and Roy, I would weigh in, it's definitely a complicated area. There's been some court decisions that, kind of the airspace, we'll call it immediately above your property. There is a gray area before it sort of transitions to just airspace.
Sure.
And it seems to be about 40-ish feet. So like a drone that's sitting, hovering on your patio outside your patio door would be different than a drone operating at 300 feet over your house. Sure. And just, so there is kind of a gray area there where Yeah, it is just part of your house, but it's yeah, the best thing is not to personally interact with a flying unmanned vehicle, whether you think they're in the right or not. There's anybody can lodge a complaint with the FAA and they will respond to each and every one. So that is probably your best avenue, rather maybe even more so than local law enforcement, because especially with remote ID, uh, they will definitely go after them if they're flying in violation of laws or irresponsibly.
Absolutely. What other questions?
Not a question, but just an interesting point that some of the public safety drone mission in Fairfax County is owned by the helicopter people. And so they already have pilots of big aircraft. And so they're also getting people trained to fly the drones. And so that's interesting. Also, drones are being pushed out to some of the patrol officers or supervisors so that in an emergency they can get them in the air pretty quickly.
Yeah, and you're somewhat a little garbled. I wasn't 100% sure, but yes. So right now, as of today, the Fairfax County has 2 helicopters. They had them back when I was still there and getting this program together. The police department has turned over the law enforcement side of the drone program to the helicopter unit. So they are actually managing all the law enforcement components to that. The other thing we did back in the day was we set up a website. You can go to it, fairfaxcounty.gov/UAS, and go there and you can look at the program manual that we created. And again, Gabe was part of that development as we built this thing with lots of different input from lots of different groups, AFL-CIO, drone enthusiasts, attorneys, blah, 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 a whole litany of groups. All that's on there. But the other thing we stipulated too is anytime one of the agencies, or emergency management, fire and rescue, or police are flying, that they would put those missions on the website. And you can go there right now and see them. They're there. They've been updating them since we left, or I left. Plus, there's also some other documents, some Q&A, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, they do a really nice job. And I will tell you, the Fairfax County Police Department use the heck out of them. They've actually expanded their program so much. They've got a lot of smaller drones now. They've gone in that they take into homes to do hostage negotiations and all that other kind of stuff. So it's pretty cool. Now, do you want me to scan through the chat? Because I see a ton of stuff.
There is another question. Do you know of any local drone racing events? And I don't. I would just Google it. Maybe Roy does.
So when I left, the Fairfax County Park Authority was actually putting together drone racing within some of their park facilities. So I would check Fairfax County Parks to see if they have anything or they started that, but otherwise I don't know.
Right. So we're not seeing any other.
Roy,
oh, sorry. There's a
Roy. Yeah. One thing I've been trying to understand is, is there an ability to electronically fence off areas, or is this more a regulatory scheme that tells people not to go there?
You're talking about from the owner of a property, or are you talking about?
I'm talking about like the national parks and NFL games and airports.
So the shorter answer is there's no physical technology that they can send up any kind of waves. Well, I say that in jest. Yes, the military has the ability to jam signals and stuff to help prevent certain things from taking place. However, the only thing legally right now the FAA and others can do is put up that NOTAM, notice to airmen flying, or in this case for the Super Bowls, these TFRs and whatnot. And again, all that is a notice to airmen and temporary flight restrictions saying you cannot fly within X number of miles. It's putting you to notice that you can't do it. You shouldn't do it. Now, going back to the DJI side of the house, DJI with their geofencing built in is if I take a DJI drone and try to fly it in Fairfax County in that 30-mile window, it won't let me. I can fly all around it, but when it gets to that point, it stops. If I fly my DJI drone here at Culpeper Airport, if I haven't got that geofencing unlocked, I can go up to a certain point of the airport and there's like an invisible wall. So that's one of the nice things, and Autel is the other company that does this, but everybody else doesn't. So if I have my Skydio drone, which is a US made drone, and again, it's a very good drone, it just doesn't have a lot of capabilities that the DJI stuff does. I could go fly in a park. I could go fly in the FRZ. I could fly over the Super Bowl. There's no restrictions on the internal technology within it as far as its geofencing. There is none whatsoever. But no, right now, my understanding is there's no way and they're going to be doing that kind of thing to, jam a signal. I guess they could jam signals. They're more relying now on remote ID and other things that if somebody does fly it, they can identify who it is and then track them down. Because with remote ID, that built-in technology will give the operations location where it's been taking off from, who it's registered to, and that kind of stuff, and that's instantly available to them. But you got to first sign up for it. And if you haven't gone to the FAA website and registered your drone legally, again, that's the other thing. I can't even fathom how many people out there who own these drones that either one, don't know that there's these regulations, or two, are just not doing it because it's Uncle Sam. They won't have that information. And I'm sure there's
let me ask the question a different way. Is there any move for the FAA to, by regulation, require manufacturers to add geofencing to drones that are sold in the US?
Not that I'm aware of. DJI did this.
It was somebody in the chat who made the observation that anybody who's ever hopped on a on-demand scooter is familiar with this. When you go into an area and you can't go faster than 10 miles an hour because it's geofenced or throttled, and you're excluded from some other areas, it'll stop.
Yeah, I don't know. It's a good question. I've not seen anything in the legislation why they're trying to mandate this to be done. I know
because going at the manufacturers seems like a more promising thing than require drone owners to take an affirmative action to comply. Joe, did you have another question, or is your hand still up from the last one?
I did have a question. I had two. First of all,
please go ahead.
It was a terrific presentation. I thought you said you had some video of drone racing, which I think would be interesting to see.
I don't have any drone racing with me, but you can go on YouTube and see all kinds of cool stuff.
Okay. You touched on this a little bit, but I've been wondering, I live in DC. DC uses helicopters to chase down guys that have knocked over a bank or something like that. They fly them around and it freaks everybody out, largely because it's big and loud. I've wondered why they can't use a mil-spec drone with infrared sensors and that kind of stuff to do that kind of tracking and save a lot of money, because helicopters are hugely expensive to fly.
So again, I can't speak from 2019 or 2020 till today, but I will tell you in 2019 and 2020, some of the regional discussions I had with some of the regional partners, the U.S. Capitol Police and the Park Police were looking at buying drones and having them set up to be used in D.C. Now, I don't know if Washington Police Department was doing that. They weren't at the time, but again, what they've done in the last 4 years, I just don't know. But again, their issue right now is that heavy restricted airspace. And it's not just because of the commercial and all that, it's because of all the military and all the feds who are flying stuff that do not put out a signal unless you're an air traffic controller. So there's a lot of that ADSB stuff which may or may not show up. Like, for example, I flew last year, I guess it was, over near Culpeper, and a Black Hawk was flying towards me. It didn't show up. He wasn't broadcasting the message. So I would never have known he was there had I not been paying attention to looking up in the air. So there's so much. Go ahead.
My point is they fly helicopters around here now. I live sort of near the park, and guys will knock over a bank and run into the park or run into alleys or something. and they fly helicopters around looking for the guy. And it's again, helicopters are grossly expensive, but they've already got they've got a aircraft up there, and it seems to me that with the mil spec stuff that they have been running for what 25 or 30 years now, that would be as good as a helicopter, cheaper, quieter, and everything. I mean, I'm sure it would freak people out because people get freaked out anytime they see a drone, but I mean, is the capability there? And am I wrong that it wouldn't? That it would
absolutely could be used. I mean, that's what local law enforcement's doing. They're doing this all the time. And I see somebody had asked a question about has it helped to help find lost children? And the short answer is absolutely. Lost hikers, lost children, lost adults, dementia patients. I mean, literally there's hundreds of saves that are documented since they started applying these things a couple of years back. So yeah, they're very, very beneficial. And law enforcement, Stafford County, Virginia was probably the top drone user when I was still in Fairfax County. They had gone hog wild. They were using multiple drones for multiple things, and they have captures of bank robbery suspects. They have drug users. They had one of the newer drones that could see. It had zoom capability that was ridiculous. You could stand off about 2 miles away and read license plates. And they did presentations on that. And they had a trailer that they'd built up and all that kind of stuff. So the short answer is absolutely. The technology is there. And maybe they're doing it. We just don't know about it.
Am I right that it would potentially be less expensive than a helicopter?
Absolutely. That's one of the reasons we had the same argument with the Fairfax County, because again, people are looking at, well, Fairfax County has 2 helicopters. Why do we want a drone? And what is the drone going to do that the helicopter can't? Well, the short answer is the drone can get in short spaces. It can get close, down, and dirty, and to do forensics where the helicopter can't. And like you said, it's a cost. I think it's $1,500 an hour or whatever it was. It's very expensive. So yes, absolutely. It'd be very, very worthwhile to do it that way.
All right. Thank you.
You're very welcome.
I just wanted to announce while people are thinking of any other questions for you, Roy, that Jerry Berman, you are our door prize winner for today's meeting. So Jerry, would you like an AirTag or an Apple gift card as your door prize from today's meeting?
Oh, an Apple gift card would be wonderful. Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Well, we'll look for that.
Super.
Roy, can you send Jerry that?
Yes, I will.
Oh, terrific.
Nice.
Yeah, I see somebody had asked.
Are there a couple of videos that you?
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, you want to see?
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Yeah, no worries. You want to see some videos?
Yes, please.
All right. Can you see anything on your screen yet?
I stopped the sharing before just so you could start it again if you wanted to show videos.
All right, share sound. Okay. Do you see a video by chance?
Yes.
All right. And you have audio?
That's good, Roy.
Okay. So this is some of the footage I took last June.
Turn the sound down just a little bit.
Yeah, this is footage I took last year in June for the Brandy Station 160th reenactors for the Battle of Brandy Station, largest cavalry battle in the Civil War. We had well over 250 reenactors there. This is their camp. So you see all the vehicles and whatnot. It was a spectacular event. There's some shots. Again, I used the DJI Mini 3 Pro, which is what you see here. There's kind of a 360. So lots and lots of people attended this thing. This was pretty cool. This is leaving St. James Church where they parked. What you see here mainly is the Confederates. Further up toward that little ridge line toward the tree line is the Union side of the house. They're all heading to Buford's Knoll. Buford's Knoll is one of the big places where the Union troops came in once they crossed over the Rappahannock and they moved away from where the airport sits to start coming around and flanking the Confederate troops. So anyway, here's a quick shot of some of the Union. All these guys are dressed to the nines. It is as real as you're ever going to get with these folks. They're very, very proud of what they do. And there you go. So that's one.
What was the
Switching
jerk in the video, Roy? It was that latency or something else?
It's latency for my computer.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, otherwise, if you saw it, I've actually downloaded it in like 2 or 3 different times, so it's just my end of it. Another thing I've done is, so I've done some stuff with Culpeper County. This is a bike event that they had last year. Again, just another opportunity to see kind of what these things do. And again, these drones are not very expensive. As you see the quality. And even with this, I could have set it up so I put a tracking mechanism on one of these riders. I'm just shooting it outside my window, but I've got another aerial shot here coming up in a second. Anyway, you could set it up where I can highlight a person on my drone screen. It will track that person the entire trip. Scoot through this. Get back up.
So do you have to choose who you think the cyclist who will be in the most?
It's all, there's actually me, my Jeep. So I've got the drone flying up here, and then of course, I'm doing a little bit of drone flying here. These guys are doing 100 miles. They're actually on their 50th mile. And this one I just put just above the deck. But again, the picture quality, the video quality of these things are all 4K. You can shoot it in 30 frames per second, 60 frames depending on what you got. And just to have a good old time. There's actually another cool sequence coming up here in a second. Oops. That's it for that one. Let me grab another one of these really quick.
What's your timetable, Roy? Do you have to leave soon?
I'm good. I'm good for probably another 30 minutes if you need me.
Okay, terrific.
All right. This is Culpeper Airport. This is one of the ones I had to get that waiver for. This is a horse group. And here's Culpeper Airport just above the tree lines, you can see. Yeah, and if you look at, if you're actually to pull this image off for the website, you don't have that little bit of flicker going on. And this coincidentally is all part of the Brandy Station battlefield anyway. Right where these guys are, some heavy fighting took place during that skirmish.
Gabe, why don't you ask your question while we're watching the video?
Roy, you were talking about flying near an uncontrolled airport and basically following the see and be seen rule. Do you have to listen to Unicom if they have a central Unicom frequency where pilots talk to each other and a ground station? Do you have to be involved in that? Do you even have to monitor?
I do not. Not required. Only thing I've got to do is the ADSB is on there. So I should, but it's not required. When we did this Brandy Station event last year in June, like I said, I had an FAA guy assigned to me the whole time, all day long, 10 hours. And he had his radio, so he was listening to all the air traffic that was coming in. And if you're flown out here at Culpeper, it's actually a very busy general aviation. We have planes. We had to actually ask them to fly in different directions in orbit because they were flying over the battlefield. And it was have it with me trying to fly my drones because I flew 2 personally. I had 2 in the air at all times. I had one in a hover and a 360. And I had another one that was basically I controlled, just to control it down low, high, whatever the case may be. And again, all these ones with the horses, you have to be very, very restricted because I couldn't fly closer than 50, 75 feet. The other issue I had to deal with too is military folks. Some of them who had issues from being in battle, PTSD. And I had one where I actually had to put the drone way far out because it was causing him anguish because of what he experienced in Afghanistan. So again, all these things you got to take into consideration when you're flying. So anyway, this just goes on with the horses, scenery. Again, I'm right now on the flight path to Culpeper on the runways. I'm flying. If a plane was landing, I would be in its way. So this is again where you have to be very conscious of what you're doing. And this is a one-man show here, so I'm sitting there, and my ADSB is on, but technically we can do all that. So anyway, that is that one. This is the Fleetwood Hill. This was day 2. Oh no, this was day 1. This is toward the end of the day for these guys. They've been out in the hot sun. So here you see Confederate folks here at the bottom. The Unions or Federal guys up there on the other side. This was a very solemn event. Fleetwood Hill is a piece of real estate that sits here. Is the most comfortable in all of the United States. There were at least 7 or 8 major engagements taking place. Not only Civil War, Revolutionary War, other events, but mostly those 2. The guy who's standing in the middle, I'm not sure his brother Paul, experts on Civil War in this area. He's a really sharp guy, but having both forces, again, the reenactment, something that never happened in 160 years since something like this.
So, Roy,
it's a little loud, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Were the horses ever freaked out by the drone or not?
I started getting low on one of them, and yes, so I had to back off. I mean, I'm probably right at 50, 60 feet. I'm pushing it a little bit, but I don't care. This is a once in a lifetime.
Roy, sometime in the chat, Sam mentioned an app that made it easier to keep track of all of the air restrictions that the drone wouldn't otherwise know about it. Can you talk about that for a minute?
So the FAA, in partnership with some other groups, came out with the Before You Fly app. The Before You Fly app no longer exists. They have partnered with other companies that actually have put together other apps. They're all free. You can download them free of charge. And there's a ton of other ones that are free. Basically, anytime you fly, you log into your app, and it will tell you if it's safe to fly, if there's any restrictions there, if you need to do any kind of geofence requests. And again, a lot of these, just to change over real quick, I do a lot of quick stuff on this and take pictures because they started getting a little wiggy, so I had to back off. But again, I mean, this is some of the actual engagement. This is what it looked like 160 years ago, except there's a whole lot less of them today than there was back in the day.
So the unit you're using, you have one button for video and one button for photos?
So I can interchange, but yes, I've got it set up so I can sit. Well, if I'm shooting in video, I have to stop the video first and then switch over to the camera.
And is there also an adjustment of the quality that you're taking in the video or the camera?
It is just like a standard DSLR 35mm camera. You can adjust the speed, you can adjust the ISO, you can adjust the f-stop on some of the drones. Mine, I cannot. It's a fixed. But then I have to go back and post, and I can make some changes and things like this. This was a fairly dark evening, and it was very tough to get the color right. And here's a GoPro shot. But yeah, you can do all kinds of stuff in post. And I'm still learning. I mean, these are...
Now, do the drones also have microphones on them? Can they detect sound or not?
They do not. Now, you can, with the newer drones, let me stop this real quick. With the newer drones, I guess that was my last one I had on deck. On the newer drones, you can sit there. Oops, sorry about that.
You can shut down the...
Okay. Let me go back to this.
Go on, please.
Yes. On the newer drones, you have the ability to record whatever you have immediately around the controller, but not from the drone itself. What I did during the events is I typically either am mic'd up myself, or in the case of when I flew the drones, I actually had remote microphones attached to some of the cavalrymen, some of the cannoneers, some of the commanders. So I was recording all these different layers of audio that I could go then turn around and post and then merge that into the events. It's a lot of work because you have to, try and cut and paste and all that kind of stuff. But no, right now as it stands, flying the drone, you can't pick up the audio from the drone. Now, there may be some out there now that you can, but none of the stuff I use, you can do that.
Mike Goldstein, go ahead.
Hi. You mentioned that there are thousands and thousands of like intruder drones and illegal drone flights. Is law enforcement allowed to like shoot them out of the sky or bring them down some other way? Do we do any of
So
that?
legally, unless it's posing a threat to public safety, no. Those 20,000 that the general spoke of literally that was last week he spoke. Those 20,000, unless they're posing some significant public safety, no, they cannot.
Thanks.
You bet.
Well, I think it's time for me to briefly share my screen. Can you shut down your screen sharing, please, Roy?
I shall. Give me a second here. There you go.
So thanks so much for this talk today at the Roy. I think everyone found it very interesting. And in appreciation for your talk today, we'd like to offer you this pie mug.
Very nice.
And perhaps via email or some other way, just send me your snail mail address, and we will send it to you.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And if there's and I'm sure there's other questions I didn't get a chance to reach to, but if you have other questions, let me know. I can certainly share and whatnot. And if anybody wants to talk to me, I can provide you my cell phone number. I love the drone stuff. I don't know all the answers, but I can certainly tell you what I do know and maybe point you in a direction where you can get some information. There's a lot of gray area. I think you mentioned, or somebody else had mentioned, there's a lot of gray area in interpretation, especially with the national airspace. But again, don't take matters in your hand. Call your local law enforcement or call the FAA or both. Because the police department, at least I know in Fairfax, have been briefed on this, and they will come out and take a report. And if you got concerns with somebody peeping in the window, and that is a law that they can violate using a drone. If you have that concern, somebody's flying over your pool and your wife's out there, girlfriend, or whatever the case may be, yeah, that's against the law. You can't do that. So whether you're flying a drone or something else.
All right. Well, many thanks again, Roy.
You're very welcome. All right. I guess I'll go ahead and just sign off. Jonathan, thank you. And Mr. Goldberg, thank you very much, Gabe. And we'll talk at you later.
Outstanding. I love it. Thank you, Roy.
You're welcome. Take care.
And Gabe, thank you again. Just let me know if you get tired of me doing this. I hope you don't, for facilitating the many connections that you've done for really interesting presentations. Thanks again, Gabe.
I'm happy to do it. I love it. And there's the obvious ulterior motive that when I book interesting speakers, I get to hear them.
That sounds like a real win-win, doesn't it? Okay, folks. Roy or Diana, do you have anything that you would like to add today?
I don't have anything further, I don't think.
Diana? All righty. Well, folks, look, we'll send around a recap of the meeting with the Zoom, the live stream, the YouTube live stream, so people who weren't able to attend today can watch it. And we'll paste the Zoom chat for all of the really helpful links. And I'd really urge you to watch the Brian Fong video that I talked about at the beginning of the meeting and put a link in the chat. It really was such a warming thing. Now, with the warning that it gets into, Apple hardware weeds quite a bit, but it's just so unusual for us to hear. The only Apple engineer that we are so blessed to hear from is Aaron. And Aaron, can I only guess from this that Apple might be loosening things a little bit as far as who can talk to the public about their stuff? Oh, have we lost Aaron? I think so.
Yep.
So I'll ask him that question at some other time and let you all know what the response is, because we already have committed Aaron to come back in September for his traditional fall talk about what's new with Apple. And those are always amazing sessions. So even before I'm even thinking of the fall, I'm looking forward to that. All right, then. Bill Wydrow, go ahead.
Yeah, maybe not today, but I can show you about a 1-minute video of one of my first attempts to fly one of those DJI mini quadcopters.
Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it's quite amusing. You may have to help me on how to do the sharing.
Well, I think at this point in the day, let me just turn it on for everyone. Go ahead. Yeah, hit the share screen, but for a video, in the dialog box that opens, Bill, you'll want to be sure to hit the 2 radial buttons to optimize the sound for the videos. You see your screen, Bill, and it's the Zoom window. You want to maximize the screen here? Yeah, that's.
That's my wife taking the picture. I'm flying I'm trying to control it. I'm just
Is this your first?
To,
is this your first drone experience, Bill?
It is. I'm trying to get used to the joysticks, and I'm trying to get a picture of the flowers.
Do you know, it never occurred to me, but a drone could be really useful because you could hover next to the flowers for long enough so the bees wouldn't take notice, and you could take pictures or videos of the way the bees stuff pollen into their legs, which is so cool.
So anyway, you can see I crashed it there.
So so that's a DJI drone?
Yes, that was a DJI Mini 3.
Mm-hmm. And why did you opt for that particular model?
Because it was at Costco. I picked it up at Costco.
Uh-huh.
But what's on my wish list is the DJI Mini 4 because it has object protection, and it would have kept me from flying into the flowers I was trying to take a picture of.
So, how did you find the setup, Bill, to get this working?
Oh, it's very easy. I mean, you can find tons of tutorial videos online, which I did watch, which I just couldn't follow accurately. But there are lots of YouTube videos that can help you learn how to do this. It's actually very, very easy to set up. The issue for me is when you're flying the drone away from yourself, the joysticks are intuitive, left and right, up and down, and so on. But when you're flying it back towards yourself, the joystick is in the mirror image. Right is left and left is right as you're flying back towards yourself. And so what I need to learn to do is actually turn around, okay, because I've got a screen in front of me showing me the camera on the drone, okay, and until I get better at learning that mirror image on the joysticks.
Can you turn the drone around, or
Oh
would
yes,
that
yeah.
not?
Oh, you can turn it in all directions. It will rotate, okay, besides going up and down, and then left and right. Yeah, it goes all directions. Yeah. It was very, very fun to do. And I've glued it back together, so it's it's operating again. I just need more practice. But they are
Thanks.
expensive. The Mini 4 that I would like to get is right around $1,000. And the
Whoa.
one I got, I think, was between 600 and 800. So they are pricey.
So was yours under the weight that requires registration?
Yes, yeah,
or-
249 grams.
Mhm.
Yes. Yep. And it folds up. So when you travel with it, the arms that have the propellers on them actually fold in. And it's about the size of your fist.
Well, I hope folks enjoyed this off the beaten path to a drones issue that is a little afield from what we usually do for our programming. And one thing that I like is most of the feedback that we've gotten, from Pi members is that they like the kind of variety of issues that our programs have been able to bring, which doesn't mean that we don't want to have a lot of really core tech stuff and Apple stuff. In fact, originally the March meeting was going to be a George Mason professor who works on AI and robotics, and that didn't work. And then a space speaker that I'd been following for a while didn't work. But happily, Roy Shrout was available via Gabe's introduction. And so there we are. Well, folks, I think the last word for this meeting should be go look at the cherry blossoms. They're still there. And we'll let you know of other Pi meetings via the Pi email list. So thanks, Roy, for everything that you do to enrich our stuff in the club. Thanks, Diana, for being our Pi president. Thanks, Gabe, for facilitating. Oh, thanks, Sam, for helping to answer questions in the chat about the drones today and helping in the questioning of Roy. And Roy Wagner. You have to unmute.
Yeah, something else just popped into mind when you mentioned go see the cherry blossoms. I don't know how many people have read the news. You probably have that they're going to have to remove 158 of the trees because the tidal basin is creeping in there and raise the wall 5 feet. But other places to see some really nice cherry blossoms is George Mason campus near the Performing Arts Center. They have like 20 or 30 trees around their pond there. Maybe, and then another one is Meadowlark in Vienna, Virginia. That's Botanical Gardens, which they have several things blooming We went there Thursday. Daffodils are blooming, but they have 2 ponds and they're surrounded by Japanese cherry trees that are in bloom now. So those are other options. I don't know what the rain's going to do to them, but those are options available. That's all.
Okay, let me say goodbye to the YouTube audience. So thank you for coming and watching our meeting today.